As delusional as Satan's thinking seems to us now, as we have reconstructed it here, the devil, originally the wisest of God's creatures, had a point. We can see, after all, from God's gracious handling of our own first parent's sin, that reconciliation and restoration and the replacement of a rebellious angelic element with an obedient human one flow from the very core of who and what our God is. Indeed, none of this has been a mistake, or an afterthought, or a successful minor repair in our present universe, in all that has happened since the original creation of Genesis 1. The Lord's plan has proceeded apace in its perfect, inexorable way. Our creation and the grace God has shown to us in sending His only Son, Jesus Christ, to die for us and thus restore us, thereby replacing Satan and his legions, have always been central to His plan. For by saving us through this, His matchless grace and the gift of His Son, God has thoroughly exposed the devil's lie and gloriously proven His character for all the universe to see. Satan's arrogance did not prevent him from making a largely correct assumption about the character of God, that He was just and fair. Yet Satan's arrogance blinded him to the obvious fact that no creature could ever anticipate what the Lord Almighty might do in justice and fairness. By creating mankind and by offering us the choice of salvation through Christ, God is demonstrating to the angels this justice and fairness, as well as the boundless depths of His love. For all who would be reconciled, there is no limit consistent with His character to which He will not go to reconcile them, even to the point of giving His own Son over to death. For all who would remain alienated from Him, He is perfectly able and justified to find others who will choose for Him and to pass judgment on those who will not. And this last point is more than replacement. The salvation of human beings and our wedding together to Jesus Christ, who has Himself come to share our humanity, constitutes a restoration of far more than what was originally lost. Oh, the ineffable and unfathomable wisdom of our God, who heals what is broken into something stronger and replaces what was lost with something better. For in the new heavens and new earth, where we shall all dwell with Him forever, the blessings which once were will be multiplied beyond our comprehension because of God's boundless love for us, His faithful creatures in Jesus Christ, His Son. It is evident from the events that followed the conception of His plan that Satan was indeed able to bring a large proportion of angels over to his way of thinking about God's probable reaction to any such coup d'etat, an appropriate name for an overthrow of authority based not upon a contest of relative force, but rather political intrigue. For before any of the angels followed him, they would need to be convinced of the prospects of success. Had they instead been certain of swift and immediate retribution from the Lord Almighty, it is fair to ask how many would have voluntarily enlisted into Satan's cause. There had to be something more, however. Satan's own motive of universal rulership is clear enough, but his potential followers would have to be wooed. Paradise, after all, could not have been so terrible as to force them into a rebellion against God for its own sake, and the obvious fact that in spite of Satan's assurances, at least some element of risk would be involved in betraying God, could not have been lost on them. Satan needed a platform, one persuasive enough to convince his contemporaries to throw in their lot with him and take the risk of eternal condemnation. Satan's revolutionary platform. It is apparently a condition common to angelic and humankind alike to want what we don't have, especially if we cannot have it. The original example of Adam and Eve vis-à-vis the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is sufficient evidence for this, not to mention the roughly 6,000 years of human history since. Perhaps even more important than convincing his would-be followers that rebellion against God would be safe and meet with success was the necessity of a positive platform, a goal that could tempt his audience and incite their lust. But what do angels lack, and what could they possibly want? They are not affected by the elements, as we are, not plagued by disease or the ravages of time, not in any need whatsoever that might incite the lust for acquisition that so inflames mankind. Yet it is precisely in that fact which liberates the angels from all the cares and concerns we humans feel so intensely that Satan found his chief selling point, the prime inducement to his fellow spirit creatures to gamble their eternal futures and bind their fate to Satan's forevermore, the very fact that angels lack physical bodies. While we humans possess both a spiritual and a material part, angels, as we have seen, are primarily spiritual creatures. The absence of true corporeality, such as we possess, is in many respects a blessing, sparing the angels the pain, suffering and tears which are the common heritage of mankind since the fall, but it seems to have left many of the angels wondering what might have been. For while human beings had not yet been created when Satan launched his campaign to unseat God, it will be remembered that the original paradise from which Satan and his followers fell was on earth. And though this is neither the time nor the place to discuss the fossil record that has been such a stumbling block over the years to pure biblical faith, we can at least observe that much of that record no doubt harkens back to the era we are presently discussing. For the pristine, original earth, though not described in Scripture, is unlikely to have been a barren desert. God creates only perfection. In the absence of other information, we would do well to assume that this original paradise was a wonder to behold in every way, fully furnished with all types of vegetation, and, most significant for our present study, an entire complement of animated, if not morally responsible, creatures as well. We can expect that such an order of creation would have piqued angelic interest. For though angels can affect material, they cannot have the rich experience of the material that creatures who are both material and spiritual can have. Without possessing a body, it is impossible to experience the sensual life of the body. Now, from everything we know about the angels from Scripture, possession on their part of the bodies of animals and of humans is contrary to the will and the law of God in every way. Satan observed the curiosity and interest of his fellows and applied the universal principle of sinful motivation treated previously. They didn't have bodies, and moreover were forbidden to possess the bodies of other creatures. Therefore, they wanted them, wanted to experience firsthand the sensual, corporeal life that had been denied them, according to Satanic propaganda. Clearly, God was not going to stand by and allow a wave of possessions contrary to his commands, much less any program of breeding and genetic manipulation that may be evidenced by the hominid portion of the fossil record. The only way to escape the rather pure spirituality God had inflicted on them was to fall in behind a new leader and take what they wanted in defiance of God. In the event, God rained down complete destruction on the world of that time. But it is interesting to note that there are a number of biblical passages which demonstrate that the lust of Satan's followers for bodies, which most approximate their own essential shape, is still very much alive.